you're looking to fill, two starting spots basically that as of right now in late March, you don't really have any clear candidates for those roles. And again, that's not a bad thing. I think it reflects competition, which is something that this staff really values. But in the offensive line room, that's kind of where it's at right now. Paid all who enter, and beware this podcast. That's right. This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. As always, we're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. And we've got another edition of our K Football Spring Position Breakdown coming up. We're going to be talking about another intriguing group. I feel like I've said that every time we talk because every group, there's a lot of competition that's happening with this K football program with all the seniors that's departed. So there's lots of interesting conversations to be had around the different position groups. And another one here today with the offensive line, with Kansas losing a couple starters from the offensive line last year and some questions about who's going to be playing where, so on and so forth. So we'll dive into that a little bit. And, of course, I'll have a chance to hear from the O-line coach, Daryl Agpalsa, later in the show, plus a couple of fun interviews with some players, including Bryce Foster, Calvin Clements, and Kobe Baynes. So very exciting show coming up. One quick thing I did want to mention off the top here as well is that we are going to be keeping our fingers on the pulse of the transfer portal with KU basketball with the season being over. So you'll want to keep that notification bell turned on Apple, Spotify, on YouTube as well, where you can go and subscribe there. Kansas Jacks KCSN for some breaking news episodes from us in case anything happens with players departing out of the portal, players coming into the portal, and possibly joining Kansas. So we'll have all of that covered. You want to keep an eye out for that. Probably at some point next week, we'll do sort of a Kansas basketball State of the Union as well, talking about maybe what this team needs in the portal versus so on and so forth, how they'll go about doing all that. So certainly be on the lookout for that, of course, over the course of spring, as we also continue our KU football position breakdowns through the remainder of spring as well. That leads me into what I mentioned here. The offensive line is where we are now, with some very, very interesting pieces around this offensive line group. This was a very experienced group last season, but lost a couple of key starters. Logan Brown, who seems to be on his way to being a draft pick. Bryce Cabledew, who had a fantastic pro day, by the way, on the Big 12 Pro Days. He seems to have elevated his potential draft stock, which is very exciting. Also lost Michael Ford from the interior. But they did bring back a couple of key pieces in Bryce Foster, transfer from Texas A&M at the center position. Also Calvin Clements, who got some starts at the tackle position. And on top of that, some other guys that could be getting into the mix, guys like Nolan Gorsica, as well as Kobe Baynes. When you look at this offensive line group, Kevin, let's just start kind of generally to this point in the spring. What do you like? What do you think this group maybe still needs to do? What's your expectations? Maybe how you feeling about this group heading into 2025?
I tell you what I like, Nick, and that's talking to Coach Agpalsa. That's one of those. He's one of those coaches that you go in, you love hearing him talk. It leaves you feeling refreshed and better about your day. He made a really interesting point, Nick, in that Kansas went out and got a lot of young guys from the portal rather than getting sort of that plug and play senior type of guy. And so on one hand, you say that they added a lot of youth to the room and guys who are going to be there for several years. He also pointed out that he said, 2,000 live snaps right about that he wound up with those new guys. And so that to me adds this really intriguing mix to this room, because you bring back Bryce Foster, to your point, going to be probably a preseason first team All Big 12 guy, going to be a guy that has a chance to compete for a lot of honors. You bring back Kobe Baynes, who started every game last year. You bring back Calvin Clements, who started games in the past, has obviously been a major part of the rotation as well. And then you kind of have this interesting mix of guys who have been in the program for a little bit of time, and you've got this underlying layer of youth. But with the newer young guys, you also have guys that are highly experienced, guys like Jack Tanner, who played quite a bit, guys when you look at Tyler Mercer being another guy that played a lot. When you look at Tabake Tuikolovatu is another guy that could wind up factoring into this lineup. And so on one hand, you do have a few pieces that you feel like these guys are kind of your bedrocks and your foundation. After that, though, to your point, Nick, a lot of balls up in the air to juggle to kind of see where those last few spots fall. And certainly you look at last year and what Kansas wanted to develop in terms of it wasn't just the starting five, right? They wanted to find 7 or 8 starting caliber guys that they could rotate through. If you're looking at it from that perspective again, then there are going to be some of these battles that aren't going to get decided in the spring. They're going to carry over pretty much into game one and potentially even into the season, those first few weeks as they figure out who and what works.
Yeah, I am expecting that this offensive line room, as you said, is probably not going to be fully settled until towards the end of fall camp. I think this is going to be an ongoing discussion about who's going to plug in where in terms of the tackle position, in terms of even on the interior as well. Like you basically have 3 guys that you know or expect to be starters. You mentioned it, Bryce Foster coming back, Kobe Baynes, and then Calvin Clements. And they're like also flat out stated Calvin Clements is our left tackle, and he expects Calvin Clements to be the left tackle of the future. So that I think is a sign of the confidence that they have in him. He's going into his redshirt sophomore season. He's had a chance to get on the field a couple, over the course of his early career, and there seems to be a lot of pressure being put on his shoulders by the staff, and I think that's a reflection of that they feel he can handle it and that they're confident that he can step into that role. So if you look at it from that perspective, that's 3 of your starting 5 positions filled. Then you're just looking at another guard and what you're going to do with the right tackle position. And as you said, there's a whole cast of characters you could look at in terms of who could fill those roles. You think about a guy like Nolan Gorsica, who got into some games last season. He's been dealing with a finger injury that's kind of limited him during the spring as well. You mentioned Tabake Tulikowavatu. I wrote down the so I try to say Tulikowavatu, a transfer from UCLA. He's been dealing with an injury as well, but he's a guy that sounds like the staff hopes can fight for a starting spot. Then you add in another guy like James Livingston, who's been in the program for a while. You mentioned Tyler Mercer as well, who played a ton at North Texas. Same deal with Jack Tanner, who was a tackle in Tulsa. So you've just got this whole group of guys really that I think are fighting for those last couple of spots in the starting lineup. And that one thing I thought that was really interesting, Kevin, as well, and we'll hear what Daryl Agpalsa had to say about it more in depth here in just a little bit, but talking about cross-training. This is a staff that over the past couple of seasons has really emphasized cross-training under Lance Leipold and really emphasized wanting to have guys that are flexible with their positions and can play different positions. And based off of what Agpalsa said, it kind of seems like maybe they are going away from that a little bit for the time being, because they have so many new players and young players in this room, and maybe just not trying to give those guys too much to handle, right? Like really focusing on, hey, let's get you comfortable at this position. Let's just get you situated within the program without necessarily worrying about that. So that's something to keep an eye on. And I think that where that could make an impact, or where you could see that impact this team, is if maybe in the season you have some injuries, hopefully you don't, but maybe that limits Kansas a little bit more than what they would expect to be in the past or hope they can be in terms of, getting what they consider to be their best 5 offensive linemen or best 6 offensive linemen on the field at a time. So that's something that is sort of small, but I think could be very noteworthy depending on how things go during the season. But another common thread, Kevin, of the conversations around KU football so far this spring has been leadership. And you heard a lot more about that with the offensive line group. We think about a guy like Bryce Cabledew, who was a steady, stalwart figure for this roster, and Michael Ford also was talked about by a number of different guys about his leadership capabilities. And now you kind of turn the page. You look at a guy like Bryce Foster, who admitted that he's not really been known to be a guy that steps up as a leader. You look at him, you look at Kobe Baynes, you look at Calvin Clements, sort of the young guy. So, we'll see how much that is a factor as well with this position group, if they can have that leadership aspect as well, and hopefully get things settled that way. And with Bryce Foster also, that dude's playing track also. People may have forgotten that, but he is throwing shot put for Kansas as well in the spring. And so that I guess maybe limits isn't the right term, but it certainly affects how much he can do in spring football for Kansas, and in terms of his training, in terms of spring football practices and whatnot. And he kind of talked about that. We'll hear from him in his own words later on in the show, sort of what that's been like, that process has been like for him specifically. But yeah, so that leaves with you a lot of questions, I think, around this group. And obviously, Kevin, the trenches are not necessarily a position group you want to have a lot of questions, especially heading into the season. And we'll see how things play out. But I think right now things are certainly very unsettled for this position group. And that's not I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean like you're looking to fill, 2 starting spots basically that as of right now in late March, you don't really have any clear candidates for those roles. And again, that's not a bad thing. I think it reflects competition, which is something that this staff really values. But in the offensive line room, that's kind of where it's at right now.
Yeah, I think Bryce Foster's thing also brings up an interesting competition sort of below the surface too, right? In that you have that center position where Bryce Foster's got 1 year left, and then after that, you're open at center. You bring in Tyler Mercer, who has a lot of experience, obviously some bona fides. Amir Herring's now been in the program for a little bit and is, was a guy that is kind of working and he's not going to give that job over easily. And so that Amir Herring, Tyler Mercer competition, I think is kind of fascinating. To your point, too, about the cross training, I think it was interesting because last year, Kansas brought Shane Bumgarner in the spring, right, to play center, wound up bringing in Bryce Foster in the summer. Both of those guys cross-trained. Shane Bumgarner worked at center and guard. Bryce Foster worked at center and guard. And so both of those guys had played a lot of football previously, but not at Kansas. And so I thought it was interesting that even with this group that there wasn't going to be as much cross-training. Some of these guys are moving to kind of wholly new spots, though. You look at James Livingston working at guard when he has previously, been a tackle. I know one of the things that Kobe Baynes said that was kind of interesting is Nolan Gorska, he thought was really sharp before having his finger injury. And one of the reasons he said why was maybe because Orska was a swing tackle guy, and now he's a right tackle. He knows exactly what he's doing every day at that position. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. What did you think about Agpalsa talking about the leadership styles? Because if you remember, the reason I ask is, a year ago, Jeff Grimes was asked, I believe, about the leadership with the offensive line group. And he said, well, it's all 5 of those guys. And then he talked about how each guy kind of led in their own different way. I think he said Bryce Foster, by virtue of being the center, inherits some leadership because he's a guy making calls and doing certain things. I remember he said Logan Brown is a leader just because of how good, which was kind of a funny line. Both he and Daryl Agpalsa talked about, and Kobe in his interview talked about Kobe Baynes' intensity, his energy. He plays with a ferocity, Nick, that I think that's kind of where he leads a little bit in terms of bringing that energy every single day, and sort of that aggression maybe is how he leads. He talked a little bit about Calvin Clements and said, hey, he's not leading big groups right now, but he is pulling single guys aside and saying, hey, here's how you can make this rep better. Well, we've heard a lot about leadership this spring, talking to Chris Simpson, him talking about the process of building leadership in a room where you have so many new guys. What did you think of Agpalsa's comments about leadership, heading further, I guess, into the spring with this group?
Well, like I said, it's kind of become a common thread. It feels like every coach, every player is talking about it because of the fact that you lost 30 plus seniors off of last year's roster. So that's, that inherently is going to leave a pretty big void to fill in terms of that leadership aspect. And yeah, Agpalsa's comments, I think were pretty telling about where this group is at, right? You do have guys that do it in different ways. Calvin Clements, he said, to basically handles more of like a one-on-one type leadership. Like, hey, I can pull a guy aside and sort of help him individually break down, this is what we need to do, this is how we're going to go about doing it, so on and so forth, versus a guy like Kobe Baynes, who's more of like the energizer, right? The guy that can get everybody fired up and things like that. So it is something to monitor, right? And I don't want to over harp on it too much, but the leadership aspect is very significant for this team. And that's why that's where I think Jalen Daniels being back made that aspect maybe a little bit underrated, because I hope that he can sort of really, really step into an even more significant leadership role than he already has, which was obviously quite large before. But there's going to need to be other guys around this team that step up, and maybe Bryce Foster or Calvin Clements is one of the other guys could do that, and hopefully help this team continue to push forward. One other final note I wanted to mention before we get into some of the interviews that we've kind of talked about is Kansas is going to have the opportunity to potentially grab a couple other players in the spring transfer portal. There's going to be a secondary transfer portal window that's going to be opening up in the next couple of weeks after spring football wraps up, where players and teams might have an opportunity to get a few more guys. Kansas is going to have the opportunity to maybe grab 2 or 3 guys, I think, in the portal coming up in this spring cycle. And Bryce Foster is a guy that they got in the secondary I guess if you want to call it summer portal cycle or after spring football portal. So do you get the sense that Kansas may want to try to add another guy to this group in the offensive line room? And if so, what position do you think they might be looking at?
Yeah, I think so. It wouldn't surprise me to see Kansas look to actually get a plug-and-play right tackle in that group to compete with Gorska and Jack Tanner for this season. I know previously, maybe heading into the spring, the thought was maybe a plug-and-play guard. I'll be interested to see Tavake Tuikolovatu is a guy that missed the first part of spring with an injury. Today was out there working shorts and everything, but is getting back into that grind. He's a guy that I like, Nick. I know some people felt like he could play tackle or guard. I think he's got a chance to compete at that guard spot opposite Kobe Baynes and really kind of make that a strong competition where you feel good about whoever emerges from that spot. And so I would expect if they do get into the spring transfer portal window, which they probably will, that offensive line would be one of the things they would look at. And then it's up to 2 spots there, right? Like in terms of you've got 3 starters, you want somebody who fits one of the 2 other spots. And so I would be interested to see if they went out to see if they could find somebody to add to that tackle room that can add more competition there, and potentially even emerge as a starter after the summer.
Coming up, we'll have a chance to hear from the O-line coach himself, Daryl Agpalsa. As you said, Kevin, maybe one of my favorite coaches to talk to on this entire staff. He's incredible. He has great wisdom, and he has such an incredible demeanor about him as a leader and as a coach. I have a chance to hear from him, plus a couple of player interviews as well with Bryce Foster, Kobe Baynes, and Calvin Clements. That's all coming up. I guess it's a chance, though, to tell you right now about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. That's right. You can shop Home Field Apparel. Get your Kansas gear, over 40-plus Kansas items at homefieldapparel.com. We're getting into the summer months. They've got excellent T-shirts that you can rock during the summer. Kansas relays. Shout out to Bryce Foster on the track team for the Kansas relay shirt you can get over there. KU baseball. They've got a great KU baseball T-shirt. Tons of great gear you can get to rock during the summer. It's cool. It's comfortable. And it's excellently made, high quality at homefieldapparel.com. And don't forget to use that promo code PAID24 for 15% off your first order if you haven't already. And so head over to homefieldapparel.com and use that promo code PAID24, 15% off your first order. More KU football talk is coming up next. Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner impossible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. If you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe on our audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN for more updates. Keep those notification bells on so you can be alerted to our latest episodes. It's going to be a busy spring, I feel like, because of KU football and also KU basketball with the transfer portal getting ready to open and everything and so on and so forth. So definitely want to stay subscribed and tell your friends about us so that they can stay up to date as well on all things happening around KU. Okay, let's get a chance right now to hear from Daryl Agpalsa, the offensive line coach, spoke with us in the media on Tuesday. Here's everything that Coach had to say.
Experience been like this spring of having just so many new faces and guys who haven't played as much playing bigger roles?
It's been fun. You know, it's a little different than a year ago where we had a more veteran squad, all younger guys, like you're saying, that haven't taken as many reps. But there's a lot of growth, a lot of competition, and I'm excited in the direction we're headed, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Daryl, how much room is there for leadership to kind of emerge at that position, center or not, just your group?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, and when you graduate, guys like Mike Ford, Bryce Cable do, it's always, you talked about the room is always going to be different in a year. Mm-hmm. And the exciting part is watching young men like Baynes, Bryce Foster, even a young Calvin Clements that are stepping up to take that leadership role. They understand it, they learned it from great leaders in front of them. And I think at the end of the day, I think it's super important for them to continue to push this thing forward like we are doing as coaches.
Do they have different leadership styles, those three especially that you just mentioned?
I do think so. I think everybody has a little different style. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, we talked about leadership being a skill. It's not necessarily being you're born with it or not. It's something that you continue to promote. I would say as a young man, my leadership qualities grew as I got older. And my style is probably a little different than other people, different than other coaches. And I think all of them lead in their own types of way, but I think we're getting what we need out of all of them.
How would you describe Calvin's leadership style?
Right now, he is learning he works in small groups. So he does a great job taking guys in one-on-one and then kind of getting them through the ropes. No different than, honestly, Bryce Cable did with him a year ago. And trying to teach them on top of what is already being taught. And I think that's his charge right now in terms of his leadership role, is working in smaller groups and smaller cliques to make sure everybody's moving in the right direction.
When last season ended, did you or any of your coaches have conversations with those three guys in particular about, hey, this is going to fall on you, or is it kind of been a natural thing that's happened?
I think a little bit of both. I think because the one thing as a coach, just running and going through a program and a unit, is always saying best teams are led by players, right? And having the ability to have those forward conversations with Bryce, Kobe, not as much Calvin, to be honest with you, because they were the older two, making sure, now listen, those guys are out of the room, you guys have to start leading the charge. We had great conversations in that respect. Calvin's been a pleasant surprise for us at the end of the day, and that's really exciting for us.
Lance talked a bit about kind of load managing Bryce Foster a little bit because of track. What's that experience been like from your perspective?
He's in track? I didn't know that. No, I'm just joking. It's been good. It's been different for us, but at the end of the day, it's exciting for him because he is a high-level thrower now. And to have him have the opportunity to reach certain goals that he can get to in track is awesome. Managing him and him being in a different role. Some of you guys that have been out to practice, some days he's got more load, other days he has less. The days he has less, what's been really exciting is the leadership piece. He's working behind the scenes, working with our other centers, making sure they're getting the calls, preparing, they'll ask him questions. But today was a high-load day for him, and it was good to have him back and get him moving.
And then just on that note, having a full off season of Bryce, having him coming late in the summer, what kind of possibilities are there for him now that you have him for a longer stretch?
I'm excited about all of them for him. In terms of his size, power, speed, intelligence, now that he's been within our system for a year, we've had him for a long time. I'm excited about his last college season and being a part of it. I think there's a lot of things he wants to achieve. And I think what the best part of it is he wants to achieve team goals first. And I'm excited to see what we can do with him.
You talked about Bryce working with other guys. Who are some of the guys working at center behind him?
Sure. We can't have enough guys snap the ball right now, right? So we have young men like Amir Herrig, Tyler Mercer, who is new to our program, Kel Farkas, a lot of centers. He's doing a great job mentoring them, getting them prepared. Obviously, Tyler Mercer, you guys will probably ask, is newer to our program. So it's always nice to have a guy that's been through it with us for a year, kind of lean on him and ask him questions that he may have from play to play.
You mentioned the younger guys earlier. Have you had to kind of coach them differently this year compared to last year because of it being an older group last year?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of truth to that. You know, when a year ago we had 8 guys that ended up leaving, you know, they'd been through the fire a little bit. A lot of it was talk, teach, and move it. This year, you gotta, with a lot of younger guys in the room, we gotta do a great job of being that spark plug with them and being that energy for them, which has been really good this spring because there's a lot of players getting a lot of reps. It's only gonna help us grow in the future. But there is a change of pace, even with coaching, making sure we establish a sense of standard in our room. And I think I love what Coach Leipold said today. We gotta have, you know, we have to have firm, concrete standards every day to be the best team we can be headed in the fall. And really it's up to our coaching staff to make sure those standards don't slip.
With so many new guys, I know you guys like to cross-train people at tackle, guard, kind of move them around and everything, but with them learning the system, how do you weigh that out or figure out that process?
That's a great question. So with a younger group right now, the most important thing I believe as coaches we have to do a great job of is get them to feel comfortable in their skin somewhere. If you watch practice, we're probably not moving people as much as we have in the past. The people that we are cross-training, there's a lot of confidence from the coaching aspect, knowing that they know their assignments and they know their jobs. But at the end of the day, with the younger group, we try to keep them at home. Once they feel comfortable where they're at, then the cross-training happens, which obviously leads to your other question, which was that's why we were coaching a little different this year.
With Tavake and Gorska having the finger injury, obviously you've had Nolan for a little while, but big spring for him with all the competition and everything. How do you kind of gauge those guys and try and build your offensive line with Tavake having the injury early? I know he was back in practice today, and then Nolan being out.
Yeah, so you know we had Nolan really for the first 5 practices.
Yeah,
he was doing great. You know, he did a lot of great things, and is showing us that we can count on him on his last season. He's down right now, but we'll get him back. Tavake's exciting because he's another new piece to our offensive line that now we're finally seeing what he has the ability to do, and he's the position that we want to say where is he going to be at the end of the day for us. But today was a non-padded day really for him. We did a lot of footwork drills, but as we finish through the last 3 weeks of the spring ball, we're really going to find out what he can do for our team.
Is there anybody that has been in the program maybe, you know, for a year, young guy, whatever, that's kind of exciting you at this point?
I think there's a lot of young guys taking steps in our program. There's a lot of guys working behind the scenes, doing everything they can. You know, you talk about Amir Harry, we got a year ago. He's taking a lot of reps at center and guard for us. Kenny Anene is working really hard. Carter Labruski is working really hard. Drayton Grimes is working really hard. You ask me a question, I'm always going to leave somebody out, unfortunately. But collectively, as a group, you talk about a guy that's been here, honestly, for a long time that's making headway is James Livingston. He's doing a great job for us, too. So that's the exciting part always in this room is as people leave, it's always fun to see who's taking the next step. And there's a lot of people that have tried and worked really hard to get that done.
You're with Nolan out, who's kind of seeing some of those reps for you at right tackle.
Sure. Jack Tanner's seeing it. He's our new guy, our new transfer in. He's been really impressive in terms of his knowledge. It's fun because a lot of people will ask the question, we took younger offensive linemen, and what's super interesting about that, it's true, but we also added 2,000 live snaps to the offensive line room of live game reps. And I think that's like doubled our room. So at the end of the day, what's really fun for us is it's really interesting to see a kid like Tyler Mercer, Jack Tanner. They have over 600 reps of game experience coming in, but they're younger. That's great for us, especially in the offensive line room. So Jack Tanner is one of those. Drayton Grimes is another one. Carter Labruski is another one. And what's really fun is we have a lot of young players that are getting a lot of reps right now to help make us better in the fall.
You mentioned Drayton Grimes. He moved into your position group. What attributes, I guess, made him a good fit for sliding into the O-line?
He's a really good athlete. He has good length, good speed, and are really athletic, can bend and can move. It's just new to him. And it's fun though. He's getting a lot of reps right now, and that's all he can ask for because, you know, repetition is the mother of all learning and experience is the father, right? So he's getting a little bit of both right now. And what's really fun for him is he grows and he learns something new every day being in a new position group. We felt like he had the ability to get that done, and he's still showing that ability every day.
Going back to the 3 additions, at least the guys that were true freshmen last year, is that a conscious decision you made to
look for players like that that add experience but maybe have a redshirt season that they can use? Like, was that a conscious decision you guys made?
Yeah, I think for me personally, it helps. The one thing in today's ever evolving college football, right? The one thing in the offensive line room, and this is totally an opinion of mine, is you don't want it to be you don't want to change. You don't want to change things over year to year to year to year. Just having it's hard to develop continuity in our room doing that. So the blessing in disguise is you take a guy that's played and started a season or 8 games and has game experience, and you can bring them in. They've been in the fire, yet they have multiple years left to help us win. That's going to make us better, I think, in the long haul at the end of the day. So there was some strategy to it, yes.
Deshaun Hanika talks a little bit about during his injury rehab, spending some time working with you, talking offensive line. First of all, have you had a tight end do that with you before? And second of all, what are some of the things you guys were really focusing on?
Great question. We have Deshaun's special. Me is. It's important for him to do well this season. He wants the team to do well. Building a bond and a bridge with him is super important. And I think he's a special young man and a special player. I'm really excited to see what he's going to do this season. But he went out of his way from December on to spend a lot of time with us, and I think it's going to pay dividends for him.
Kobe's a pretty fiery guy. How can that be contagious, kind of for the rest of the offensive line?
Yeah, his energy is unrelenting in a good way. And when you have several younger players just kind of figuring it out and learning, they get to use him as an example on what it should look like and how the type of energy and speed you have to play with to be successful at times. So it's been really fun, and we talk about leadership styles, right? Calvin is a one-on-one. Kobe's always going to be by example in terms of showing people what it needs to look like. And it's fun because as he gets better, he's pulling more people along with him in that respect.
Was he a guy that got better over the course of last year? It felt like he was maybe playing at a higher level at the end of last year from where he was at the start.
100%. 100%. He took a huge step from game 1 all the way up to game 12. And the best part of what has happened since, he's taken another huge step from the end of the season to the beginning of spring. And the one thing we'll continually talk about with him is there's another step he's going to take in the summer, and then one more before we get to the season.
Hey, with Nolan and that progress in those first 5 before the injury, how common is it for you, or in your experience, to see guys late in their careers like that just really grab onto it, that urgency of this is it, the kind of final run, and just really give it all you got in the final run to make it yourself stand out and earn a spot or whatever it is?
It's more common than you think.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest piece is when you're sitting behind a guy waiting your turn to get ready to go. It's always that guy graduated, it's my turn. And then that sense of urgency picks up. I don't know if that's offensive, I think that's everybody. What's interesting and what we continually tell people is this: most people get their first opportunity to play because something happens to the guy in front of them. And that's why we're always about be where your feet are at. And one thing we talk about in a lot is work while you wait. While you're waiting your turn to be the guy, you better continue to work, because you never know when your time will come. And we want to make sure you're prepared and we can count on you when your time comes, because sometimes you only get one shot. Somebody goes down, we're going to put you in, that's your chance. So I think it happens more often where it's my turn, I got to be ready to go. And I will say from last spring, and you guys were here with us last spring, from last spring to this spring, Calvin Clements is a different player. He really is, and that's exciting for our program. It's how much can our next guys take those steps that Calvin's taking too, that we'll find out how good we can be.
What is the next step for Calvin if you're looking at kind of where he's going?
I think at the end of the day, when you're talking about guys that you trust, is their ability to, I guess the word is to be consistent, stack plays. We talk about doing our job, and if you do your job on one play, stack it to another play. You can stack it for a play, stack it for a series. You can do a series, get to a half, get to a quarter, to a half, to a game. If that makes sense, that mantra, being more process-oriented. For Calvin Clements to take the next step in our program really comes down to how many plays can he stack in a row? How many days can he stack in a row? When he becomes highly consistent, that's when he becomes a great player.
Were you impressed and or surprised by how well Bryce cabled you tested at the Big 12 Pro Day last
I
year?
told her, no one listened to me. No, I'm telling you. Every scout asked me that question, and I'm being completely transparent. I said, somebody's going to get a diamond in the rough because that kid is an ultra athlete, and unfortunately, through bad coaching, he should be playing guard. But we need him to play tackle. And, you know, I'm happy for that young man. Actually, he was here yesterday. Spent a lot of time. It's fun now being here for a year because you have guys like Logan Brown come back. We spent a lot of time together. Bryce Cable was in my office yesterday. Watching them succeed and get their opportunity, that's what it's all about, right? Is seeing these young men grow up and become what they want to do and do what they want to do. So I'm not surprised. I'm happy for him. But there was a lot of work that went into it. And like I told all the scouts, somebody's going to get somebody and be really excited about him. And I don't think he's a secret anymore. No, he's not anymore some of those times. So.
If Calvin takes the next step that he's going to take, where do you see him playing next season?
Where do I see him playing? What do you mean by that?
Like what position?
I still think he's left tackle. Yeah, he's a tackle all day. And he's our guy at left tackle. Now, would I flip him? No, I don't think so. Like, what I love about Calvin is you lock him in at left tackle this year, and he's a tackle till the day he's done playing college football. And I think that's where it best fits and it best suits him, I think, at the end of the day.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
That was Kansas offensive line coach Daryl Agpalsa speaking with the media and us on a Tuesday afternoon. Such an incredible guy. He's somebody that, honestly, Kevin, I would pin as a future head coach down the line. I mean, he carries himself so well, and it's such an easy conversation and great to talk to. Always love hearing from him.
Yeah, great combination of energy and philosophy, right? Like, he's incredibly well thought out, and even beyond that, he knows how to vocalize and verbalize what he wants to do. And then you see him on the practice field, Nick, and you do not see many more intense coaches out there. And he's a guy that I think Kansas fans are going to be very happy with, sort of the way that he squeezes every last juice out of these kids, and seems like a guy that really focuses on not just doing it on the football field, but squeezing every last ounce of juice out of these guys, you know, in their personal lives and making them better humans as well.
Well, speaking of the players, we got a chance to hear from a couple of them as well. First, the center, Bryce Foster, Texas A&M transfer, coming back for a second season at Kansas, also playing track, and he spoke about that and plenty more with us. Here's everything Bryce Foster had to say.
What was it like going through a full offseason of strength and conditioning after having gotten here in the summer last year?
Yeah, it was fun. I actually really enjoy our strength conditioning stuff. You know, I feel like it translates really, really well to the field, and I kind of felt that last season. They were like always in the beginning of fall camp, you're always going to get tired and stuff like that, but the way we structure our practices and the way we structure our strength conditioning programs, when we get to that first game, you don't really ever get tired. You don't really think about getting tired. I mean, a lot of the drives we had were like 12, 14 play drives whenever we scored. I think we had 2 or 3 drives last year that might have been under 10 plays that we scored a touchdown on. And so, you know, just being able to have that longevity and that long of drives, it tires up the defense and it kind of gets us more excited.
I know you said there's some changes in the offense, but not a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
How are some of the guys kind of buying into Coach Dabrowski, a guy who's already been there and a lot of the guys already know?
Yeah, a big word we use around here is trust. And it's, you know, whenever we're talking to people, especially like inside of our O-line room, it's like you had to trust the person next to you that this is going to be the best play of their career every time. So we talked about reaching our full potential, right? We talk about every single play that we run is the best play call in the world. Like, there is no play call that's any better than this one, and this is going to hit for a touchdown. So when we have that mindset and we trust Coach Z to make these play calls, then we're all on board.
With you participating in track, what's that process like? How has it been for you to try to balance that and this also during the spring?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's difficult. I mean, my body's pretty tired. There's days where it's like I'll wake up at 5:15 in the morning and I'm just like, oh. But it's like instead of like looking at it as like, oh, I have to do all this. It's like I get to. There's so many people that wish they were in my position for just one of the sports that I play, right? And I get the opportunity to do both at a place that I love and getting to play for coaches that I love playing for. And so it's difficult, but I do really enjoy it. But I answered a question earlier, and it was kind of like at noon is when I kind of flip my switch, where it's like anytime before noon, I'm like, all right, football, I'm locked into football, everything's football brain. As soon as noon hits, that's chink, and it's onto track. And I think about track, and I think about technical cues that my coaches talk to me about and stuff like that.
Are there aspects of track, I guess the technical side, that you feel like help you on the football field or vice versa?
Yeah, definitely. Just explosion in that simple word. Shot put's all about patience and the explosion, right? Which I'm still working on that quite a bit right now. But no, it's kind of just waiting for that perfect time to strike, which is kind of something like pass pro or even run blocking, right? When to shoot your hands, how much power to shoot in your hands, all that type of stuff. Make sure your feet are in the right spot, feeling balanced. That's what I think that helps a lot.
That footwork's different, though, obviously.
Yeah.
It?
Oh, yeah. Way different.
Yeah.
But they both have like their little niches where it's like for track. A big part I'm working on right now is kind of not pushing off like the inside of my foot and actually like turning my whole foot to like face the sector lines. Because in football, like O-linemen, we're taught to block on the insteps of our feet. Okay. And so I have that so ingrained in my head that I'm kind of struggling with that portion right now. So that's why I was like, I literally have to like switch my brain process of like, okay, now it's like different, I gotta change. And so that's one of the more difficult parts about it.
Do you find your feet being track feet when you're out here or football feet when you're out there? The moment feel that necessarily?
Not really. I mean, like I said, when I'm not out here on the football field, I'm like football. Right. Like everything. I'm thinking this step has to be here, right? And then when I'm out there in the ring, I'm like, all right, now I'm focused on. Honestly, it kind of helps wearing different pairs of shoes. That kind of like gets my mind into it. When feeling cleats and turf versus like a smooth bottom on concrete, it's a little different. It's kind of hard to explain when I put it that way, but I can kind of feel a little difference, and my brain just kind of like clicks into something like a different mode.
You've had a full season here, obviously, and Daryl Agpalsa, your O-line coach, had a full season here as well. How can you describe his coaching style, maybe what he brings to you guys? Yeah,
he's big on teaching. He's especially with the older guys right now. We're trying to help him teach like all the younger guys all the stuff. There's times where he's gonna get frustrated, and he's just like every coach is and every player is, right? Where he's like, you can't make the same mistake. So we use like a word called preemptive warning. So we'll talk in our meetings and we'll say, all right, like all else fails, I just want to see this. If we don't see this, then blah blah blah. And that's like our preemptive warning. We're like, all right, whether it's like a big effort day or every day's a big effort day, but the same thing along those lines. Yeah.
I think you mentioned it earlier about the leadership within this room, right? You lose a guy like Bryce, you lose Logan Brown as well, and Mike Ford, you mentioned it also. What's that process like of sort of keeping that continuing with the leadership of the room? Are you taking a step forward, or you seeing other guys take a step forward? How's that process playing out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Coach D talks to us all about like we need our room to be player-led, not necessarily just coach-led. Because if a coach is trying to push people and stuff like that, that means we're just allowing it, right? Like in our culture, we talk about leading a horse to water, and we're going to force that water to drink instead of just leading it to water, right? We're going to force it to drink. We're going to force it to do things the right way, and that's kind of where our culture's always been. And we always say like our standard's a standard, right? We're going to do everything to our full capability every time. If you mess up, you mess up. Go 100 miles an hour doing it.
You talked about replacing Logan and Bryce. Just how much have you thought about coming into the spring, the fact that you guys are replacing both tackles?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, big word is trust. I think we have everything we need in our room in order to succeed. I mean, I have full trust in all the guys next to me, and they have full trust in the guys next to them, and we have full trust in the room. And so I don't really think it matters who's playing there, because I think any of us could play there, really. It's just a matter of trusting and having each other on the same timing, same level of camaraderie, all that type of stuff, just so we can play at the same level we did last year.
How quickly did you get that trust with Calvin? Because he's young, but he also actually has played a good bit for someone who's still on the younger side.
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of the guy who helped me. He actually hosted me on my OV when I came here in the summer. Was that a year and a half ago, something like that?
Yeah.
And I kind of got to meet him a little bit. When I first met him, I thought he was kind of quiet, and so I was like, all right, weird guy to put me with, but okay. But then after a few hours of all of us hanging out, he opened up, and it was like, okay, these guys like really like love each other in this room. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is that whenever Bryce went down in that game and what was it, Iowa State, I think, when he got rolled up on, I think it was Iowa State, and we had Calvin come in. I looked at Calvin, give him a fist bump, brother, let's do this. You know, I trust him to do everything that Bryce can do, and so I'm super excited to see what he's going to do for us this year.
That was Kansas center Bryce Foster speaking with us and the media on Tuesday afternoon. Foster, he's always such an interesting guy, always has great insight into how his thought processes work, and speaking about how he handles both dealing with football and track. Track is something that's so important to him as well. So, and obviously Kansas has one of the most successful track programs in the country as well. So hopefully he can be a part of that this spring and then help Kansas reach their goals in the fall as well on the football field. So next we had a chance to hear from Kobe Baynes, a guy who is known as sort of a fiery personality. And here's what Kobe Baynes had to say when speaking with us and the media.
Coach was talking about Calvin taking more of a leadership role. Have you seen that from him?
Yeah, like Big Cal, he's been there since 22. So coming in his third year, he's just doing all the right things. Just playing physical, getting better in the weight room, being a better player, and so I'm just excited to see his growth. So.
What was that conversation like? Where you said Coach asked you guys to bring up the room. What was that conversation?
Just it's kind of like it's my senior year now, so it's just what can we do to help this room improve after we leave? And I feel like that was the biggest thing. Like I always took it when I was a younger guy. Dirk took me under his wing, him and Pooney. So like I kind of want to do that same thing that Dirk and Pooney did for me, that I can do to them. So.
Coach says that your energy can kind of bring up the offensive line room. Is that something you feel?
Yeah, like 100%. Like I feel like the energy part is real. Like if there's no energy in practice, especially in our position, we're gonna come out flat. It's not gonna be a good day. So we have to get the ball rolling. So I feel like it's my job essentially to kind of bring the energy. So.
Is that something you feel like on Saturdays too?
Yeah, like I'm a very kind of mellow guy, like outside of football. But when I get kind of in those pads, I kind of just I'm happy to be there and I'm blessed to be in this position.
How about the young guys? Has anybody kind of stood out to you? Or
one guy is I think it's really flying underneath his radar is Kene. He's completely just doing the 180. I'm so proud of that guy. Like he's doing a 180. I mean, he was playing tackle last year. Now he's playing guard, and I mean it's night and day. Tyler Mercer, Jack Tanner, David Abajan getting back healthy. All Eli Richmond, like a lot of the young guys are really coming along. So proud of them.
What do you think about the guard spot opposite you? James Livingston's getting a lot of reps there right now.
Big Jim been there since 22. I think Jim is really just revolutionizing this game. I would say he was playing tackle a little bit, then he kind of moved inside the guard, and I think he understands it now. Like I think at first, with any position change, you kind of have to kind of get understanding of the reps and the position. But I think now it's clicking for him, and I'm happy to see Big Jim, Big James. We call him Jim, so just happy to see him do his thing. So.
Well, you've played some tackle in the past. What's that change like?
I think for an inside guy, I think realizing that I have less space to operate. Like I can't overset on a 3 technique, or I can't overset on the 4. I'm limited in my space. So just knowing that I have to essentially kind of work with what I have, and it's a feel thing. It's like, okay, I'm out here on the island at tackle. Now I'm playing guard. It's like, okay, I'm in between 2 guys, and I kind of have to work on this petri dish. That's what Coach A talks about. We're on a petri dish, going back and forth. And so,
you guys do the drill where you kind of double team a guy and then peel off to a linebacker. Is there somebody you'd rather be doing that with than Bryce Foster?
I love BF. That's my guy. So that's one of my favorite drills to do with him. Shout out Mike Ford. That's my OG. So I always love being with Mike. So,
Did you watch any of these guys' pro days?
Yes, Bryce Cabodu went freaking monster. Like, and it's not a shock to anybody that's in here. Like, we know the athlete and the person that Bryce Cabodu is.
Yeah.
So for him to go out there and put it on the board and put numbers up, I mean, I was happy for my brother. So.
You guys, a lot of you guys were texting him after that.
Yeah. Him and Mike, they did their thing. Bones, Logan, they all did their thing, so it was pretty good.
Katie's been really good on the offensive line since you've been here. What sort of, I don't want to say burden, but what is that to try and carry this mantle into the next year?
I think, you brought up a great point. Like, us, I think I was just talking to some of the young guys today, like, that group we had where we were 6-7 guys deep that could all, like, we're legit D1 starters, and I think that it's the mentality that we try to have, and I just, I just love being here at Kansas, and I love kind of seeing the progression over time, from Earl Bostic to Jack Tanner, so like it's crazy to me. So
how's the offensive line changed since you've been here?
I just, like I said, going from Big Earl to Jack Tanner, it's faces and people from different places, and it's just so unique. And I feel like that model that we're trying to keep, like we're the mob, men of Booth, and that we try to play with a chip on our shoulder. A lot of guys in that room weren't highly recruited. They didn't have a lot of offers, and so I feel like they have to kind of come out and bring that attitude. And I think we're trying to bring that back, and we're trying to continue what we had in 22, 23, and 24, and bring it to 25. So,
how much does it mean to be able to work against this defensive tackle group?
I think this D tackle group, they are. I love those guys. They give good work every day. DJ Withers, Tommy Dunn, Gage Keys, Keenan Caldwell, even Blake Harrell, Marcus Calvin. They all do such a good job. That group is very tight knit. They always work together. They're inseparable. So when you're in the locker room and you see them, they're always together. And I think it pays dividends to how they play. I think that's going to show up this year. How the D tackle group plays. They're tight knit, and so it's good to play against them.
Good to get Tabake out there.
Oh yeah, I call him Big V. Big V. It's good seeing Big V out there. He is who he is. I think when he gets back into it, he's gonna show who he is, and I'm excited for him.
How well was Nolan playing before he had this?
Nolan was good. Nolan. It was a transition because Nolan last year was playing right tackle. He was playing right tackle, left tackle. He was kind of a swing tackle, and so him playing more right tackle, kind of more defined. I think he was doing a good job, and him doing this thing. I'm excited for him to kind of take this next step. Even though he's dealing with a little I don't think it's a setback, but he understands that he's gonna play well, and so I'm excited for him too.
Kobe, with being in the program, have you kind of taken on more of a leadership role?
Yes, sir. That was a big emphasis in the offseason that a lot of coaches have for me, was that take the next step. Personally speaking, I've always been a guy that's kind of just, I've been in the background. I'm a worker bee, and so having a mentality of can I take that next step and be a leader instead of a worker bee? And so that was something that I was challenged on, and I kind of love that challenge because it makes me better. It makes me a better player. It makes me a better person, and I just shout out Coach Lee for really honing that in for me.
Last but not least, the Lawrence native from Free State High School, Calvin Clements, a guy who is poised to step into the starting left tackle role. Had a chance to speak with us about that and his leadership style and plenty more. Here's what Calvin Clements had to say. The last year you guys had 2 tackles, Logan Brown, Bryce Cable-Dew. Both those guys moving on. What did you maybe learn from them that you're hoping to apply for your season this year?
I learned from them. I learned a lot of stuff from them. I feel like they played a big role in my development. Being a young tackle coming up, you always need peers to look up to. So they played a big role in how I developed, just in terms of technique, but also in just how to handle being a tackle at this level.
Have you still talked to them at all, even after this past season?
Yeah, I've kept up with them a little bit. Talked about pro day, and then Logan at the combine, was able to conversate with them a little bit, just congratulate them on great showings. But,
were you surprised by how Bryce did at his pro day?
Well, maybe a little bit surprised, but I knew he was an athlete. I knew he was going to show out, so it was just awesome to see him reassure that.
And this spring, what specifically are you looking to try to take a step forward in your game? I
would just say, I've got it to the point where I know what to do. Now it's refining how to do it and building confidence with it.
Are there examples you can point to in that respect?
I think becoming more comfortable in pass pro, having a plan 100% of the time, and just developing those as habits. Just more consistency and then confidence coming with it.
You guys have had a whole season with Daryl Agpalsa now and into the off season. Yeah. What's he like? What's he like on the field, off the field? How's it been with him and your coach?
It's been awesome. He demands the same standard every day. You're going to come in with the same coach every single day. He's gonna be on our heads in the film room, and it's gonna be an active practice. He's gonna be fast. It's gonna be fun. He's gonna keep us engaged. But he does a great job of getting us ready to play. So it's always a joy coming in and getting coached by him.
When you watch Logan at the Combine or Bryce's Pro Day, do you ever envision yourself in those situations, or are you just watching it to enjoy a former teammate sort of taking that step?
Definitely envision it to see myself in those situations in the future, and then taking things from them so that I can better prepare myself for that situation in the future.
Is there, you mentioned learning from them, I guess, is there something from Logan that you can point to that you took, and maybe something from Bryce as well?
Yeah, I would say from Logan, I would just say his physical play style. He's not a very passive player. He's super athletic, super strong, and I'd like to take after him in those ways, like in the weight room and such. But just playing fast, physical, and strong. And then from Bryce, I love his speed. They're both very athletic, but I like his speed off the ball. His set, I would always take after how he was able to get off the ball really well. So.
Coach Agpalsa was talking about you as a left tackle. That's just where he sees you. How does it feel knowing you have that confidence from the coaching staff? Like, this is a guy that we want to put in this spot.
Yeah, it's awesome. It feels really good, but there's also some responsibility with it. I got to come in, same player every single day, but just building the confidence at that spot. That's the key.
I've also talked about your sort of leadership style. How would you describe how you try to be a leader within the room working with the other offensive linemen?
Yeah, I would say leading by example, but we don't necessarily 100% believe in leading by example because we believe everybody should be held to the same standard here. So kind of growing vocally as a leader, whether that be in the meeting room, out on the field, pulling guys after meetings to draw on the board or go walk through in the indoor, work extra technique. I think that's a spot where I see my leadership.
Do you think you'd be stepping up as a leader in the way you are if you were just at this point in your career, like years-wise, or because you're left tackle, do you think that's maybe pushing it a little bit further than where you might have been otherwise?
I think it's a little bit of both. Okay. I think part of it is, I've been here for a while, so I know how it goes. So I gotta take that step as a leader. But at the same time, the guys towards the back of the room, they're gonna look up to that one left tackle. So that's definitely a role that I have to take advantage of.
Do you feel that maybe a little bit extra, knowing that there's a lot of new guys in the room this year with you, a lot of guys coming in, transfers, so on and so forth?
Definitely trying to build habits that are gonna build standards. That's very important. What we do in the front of the room is going to affect what the guys, with what the new guys are going to do. So just uplifting that standard every day.
That was Calvin Clements speaking with us earlier in the week about his leadership style and how he's stepping into that bigger role, and also about Bryce Cable and him still helping out a little bit with Calvin as well, and Logan Brown also. So Calvin Clements, always a fun guy to talk to. And of course, again, Lawrence native from Free State High School. So that's a look at our K football position breakdown for the offensive line. Still plenty of question marks to be answered over the remainder of spring and into fall camp. So it's a group to certainly keep an eye on. Kevin, you got any final thoughts here before we wrap things up here?
I just think this is such a fascinating group because in some groups you're almost starting all the way over. In other groups you maybe bring back a lot of experience, like the defensive tackle group. This one's kind of in the middle, where you bring back some guys that you maybe know what to expect, that you're excited about, like Bryce Foster and Kobe Baynes. But I think too, Nick, with so many young guys and competing for spots, there are going to be some guys on the two deep that maybe we didn't even talk about, in this show, because or not really focus on, just because that's going to be the type of group that this is. And so these are going to be battles that are going to carry over into the fall when you look at, who's going to be behind Bryce Foster when Bryce Foster leaves? Is it Amir Herring starting next year? Is it Tyler Mercer? Is it Amir Herring next to Tyler Mercer? What role does Tavaki Kolovatu have? Is he a guy that can fill that right tackle spot or compete for that spot? Is he somebody that slides into guard? Braden Grimes moved over to the offensive line from the defensive line, is a really good athlete. How does he continue to develop with the reps he gets this spring, over the summer, in the fall? And then there's that young group too, with Kenny Anene, Carter Lavreski, and David Abidjan, where one or more of those guys is maybe going to emerge and put himself into a spot to get some playing time this year, maybe becoming a guy on the two deep, or finding a way into some playing time that maybe we're not expecting. The other guy that I think, maybe he's in line for a red shirt, Nick, but he's a big guy, has a big frame, and I liked his feet on tape. He he had some agility for that. Is DeAndre Harper, who they brought in, is a guy that I wouldn't necessarily expect him to start this year. I think there's some rawness there, but I also think that there are some traits, and those are the guys that they're going to keep an eye on over the next few months as well. It's not just going to be filling those couple starting spots or developing the guys that are returning starters. It's going to be building this offensive line room for the years to come with some of those guys.
I'm glad you brought up Graydon Grimes as well, because yes, that Grimes, Jeff Grimes is done, still on the team. And he did switch over to offensive line. So I'm glad you mentioned him also. But yeah, really echo a lot of what you said. This is going to be a position group to continue to monitor, not just for the starting jobs heading into this fall, but as you said, some guys that are going to be battling to be on the 2 deep and battling for jockeying for position, potentially for even looking into 2026, right? And I thought Daryl Agpalsa had a great quote about work while you wait, right? If you're behind a guy, you still want to keep your nose to the grindstone and keep on working. And that's exactly what we're doing here on the Paid Podcast. We keep our noses to the grindstone. We keep working. There is no stopping us. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode of our KU football position breakdown. We're going to be continuing over the course of the remainder of spring, breaking down each position group. If you missed any of our previous ones, of course, you can go back and check those out on our audio and on YouTube as well. And if you haven't already, please subscribe on our Apple or Spotify, and also on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jacks KCSN. Drop a comment, share your thoughts. We love to hear from you guys. You can do that on YouTube. You can do that on social media at Paid KCSN on Twitter, or at Nick Springer 29 at K Flaherty KCSN. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review. If you do so, we might shout you out here on the show. So you can do that as well. So that helps us grow the podcast also. So we're going to be talking plenty more KU football over the course of the spring, and as I mentioned, KU basketball as well, as that news continues to trickle out with transfer portal updates, so on and so forth. So absolutely, you want to stay locked in, stay subscribed, stay with those notifications on so you can be alerted to our shows as they drop over the course of the remainder of the spring. But until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.